Hello traders, this is the bigger picture weekly video. I'm recording it on Saturday, a bit later than usual due to some family obligations, and in this video I will just go shortly through the large time frame charts and talk a bit about the data and earnings reports for the next again shortened week, a third shortened week in a row due to the Labor Day, May the 1st on Thursday. So Thursday is going to be a non-working day for us, but US markets are going to be opened. So very similar like this week, in which we did had Easter Monday as a non-working day, while our American friends had a working day. Now, this is a comparison between DAX index and DAX futures, and as we can see on both of these charts, daily 50 was reached, and it was reached on futures early on Friday, while a bit later on index. This is non-back adjusted chart on futures, well, this is index chart, and just one single note there would be, hey, this gap is still holding, and one of the concepts is also, since this is almost a 300-point gap and should be considered as a wide one, that those wide big gaps are likely not going to be filled from the first attempt. And that first attempt was on Thursday when market pushed lower, but they were not even able to test the Wednesday low. As we can see here, Wednesday low, when you observe these numbers here, Wednesday low was, let's round that, on 21,723, while Thursday low was on 742. So here there is a 9-point difference between these lows, and as written before, this is why it is always better to use zones versus levels, because you cannot really expect a level to be tested to the point every single time. Most likely a price is going to react either in front of the level or to make a small poke below it. Those two variations are much more common than testing the level to the point. Now, as long as this gap here is holding, that is important short-term reference for us. And the next important short-term reference would be, let's go now fully on index. That's going to be this lower end of the multi-week range that we had previously. And as we can see here, you see where the price closed. They closed at 22,242, while the level is 22,230. So the close is just 12 points above this, which for the next week is going to give us two scenarios. First of all, before those first two scenarios, we need to understand that DAX was a strong market going into this week. The previous week was here from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and these 4 days are actually green on futures, while index had this red day. Then we had this as current week, also 4 green days. So we had strength going into this week. That strength continued with this gap up, which held. So we are having strength going, but going where? Going into this resistance here where the eye is. So market did react from the daily 50 on Friday. We did have a tradable setup there, but then they pushed higher and they didn't make a decisive close above it. That is very important. Basically, price is still sitting on a daily 50 and they poked just a bit inside this multi-week range, closing just 12 points above 22,230. So what can be here the case? The case can be, okay, pushing higher, making there a stand of the lower end of this this multi-week range, and going then higher toward this gap to fill this gap for a start, then going higher toward the all-time high, or being rejected from this multi-week range, which is now a overhead supply basically, and If that is the case, market could still make a marginal higher high, for example, going a bit above this Friday high, then going inside the Friday range, finally being rejected down, where I think that here we could still again expect some bounce, but in case of the rejection, odds of actually filling this gap are increasing, and in that case market could go down and fill this gap. So those would be our simple main scenarios for the next week. So either acceptance inside this multi-week range from the previous period, going higher toward the midpoint of that range and filling this gap, and maybe later going toward the all-time high, versus being rejected, either by being rejected straight rejection from it, or by making a marginal higher high then a rejection, in which case we could expect a move down toward this gap and eventually filling this gap. So those would be the scenarios for DAX. Let's compare DAX now with the S&P. This is S&P index versus S&P futures, and what can we observe here would be that this was a scenario or idea before the open on Friday, that the S&P could actually gap up over that resistance, because they attempted to break that resistance a few times. You see how many candles came close, relatively close to that resistance, but they still didn't have a close above it. Now on Friday they did close above it, but similarly to DAX, they also didn't have a decisive close above it, because this resistance is 5,505, while the close here was at 5,525, meaning just 20 points above. Now 20 points on S&P is obviously more than 20 points on DAX when we are speaking in percentage based calculations, but still 20 points isn't that much even on the S&P, and this is something also to closely monitor with absolutely the same scenarios like DAX has. Either they're going to be rejected from this range here down toward the gap, or they're going to be accepted, and if they are accepted, then guess what? Daily 50, from which DAX already reacted, and here is daily 200 on the S&P. Maybe better to watch that here. Cleaner chart on futures. Daily 50, daily 200 above. Likely there's going to be some reactions from these important moving averages. Now going higher to the weekly time frame and look at the DAX. Let's turn off just everything here and just observe this. This here, which is a very small thing on a weekly chart, this here was a massive spike on week's end on VDAX, on that volatility event in August, which lasted just a few days. While this is on tariff, so both are man-made drops or corrections, call it what you want. This one was bigger, and in case of DAX flirting with the bear market, and yet you see the bounce so far almost 18%, and you can vividly see here that DAX is right at the balance breakdown point. And again, it's a question for the next week: is it going to be accepted back inside this range, or rejected over that gap which is visible on a daily chart? Let's go now on US markets, and all markets had green candles. Here on the S&P, for example, it's interesting that they made a higher low basically right at the August low, at that same level. S&P went a bit lower than the DAX. They actually went into the bear market territory, and the only index that didn't do that from US markets was Dow Jones. This is Nasdaq, minus 25%. Also, they went back inside the range which was in several previous weeks. That was 2-week range from which market went higher to backtest this trend line, then dropped, but again bounce from the level. All these levels, large time frame levels from which Nasdaq, S&P and DAX bounce, were featured in April 6th bigger picture videos. And this would be Dow, as said before, the only one from the US markets that didn't go below minus 20%. Also green week, and finally Russell. And the eye on the Russell would be also on the previous support, and later that was a breakdown point. Going back to for us, most important market obviously is going to be the S&P, and once again comparing S&P with DAX, let's go side by side, not with Russell but with the S&P. And here is that comparison, and this here would be that level. Let's make that level here on a weekly chart to observe that 5,505. And this would be the close. Once again, not a decisive close, and you cannot even see it on a weekly chart that DAX actually went just a bit inside that previous balance. It is only visible here, again, just 12 points. Now, next week is going to be absolutely packed with data and earnings reports, and again, that can also, make some impact on the price. Note that all of this which we're watching now for the past few weeks is everything is news driven downside, news driven upside, and everything is about tariffs and about Trump and US administration, and that DAX was a stronger market before all of this happened, and therefore it is obviously much closer to the all-time high than the S&P, and DAX is still a leading market. This is important to understand, because people are prone to react on some kind of fundamentals and headlines, while remember that context is going and is given from the charts, not from the headlines. It is from the charts. There's always charts first, everything else next. There is nothing on Monday. There is jobs opening on Tuesday, and then the show starts from Wednesday with German preliminary CPI, then US advanced GDP, then core PCI price index, which is always important, and then we are having also a bunch of earnings. We're having Airbus, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen on the German markets, and those auto companies can really shake the market because they're on their own a small percentage of DAX index weighting. Every auto company is like less than 3%, but they can make a big impact because they are going to drag all other auto companies and the companies that are dealing with them, like Continental, like some other companies. That's very important. And we also have Microsoft and Meta after the close on the US market. So everything of that can make impact. And German earnings on Wednesday, and US earnings on Wednesday will make impact on Thursday because they're after the close, and then markets are going to react on Thursday in the overnight, in the Asian session. Then on Thursday, which is a non-working day for us, but for Americans is going to be a working day, and there's going to be Bank of Japan day, and there's going to be also some US data, and there's also going to be Amazon and Apple after the close, which are going to make impact on Friday, which is working day for everybody. And on top of that, Friday is also having the NFP report. And I think we should expect lower liquidity on Friday on the European markets, simply because everybody and their mother is going to, connect Thursday with weekend. Who is going to work on Friday? Tell me that, please. May the 2nd. In many countries, Serbia included, May the 2nd is non-working day. We are having two days. Obviously, we are working as traders on Friday, and I am going to obviously make morning notes and charts. But who is actually on a European side of trading? Who is going to actually trade? I think that all trading desks are going to have half of a staff only, while everybody else is going to be on a long weekend. And why? Because we only have Easter and Labor Day as holidays up to Christmas. There's nothing up to Christmas. So if you want to go on holiday, on those longer weekends, now is the chance, and everybody's going to take that chance. So therefore, on Friday, which is going to be heavily influenced by Amazon and Apple earnings from the night before, there is also an FP report. So Friday could be a wild day then, because those moves are much easier to be made. If market is going to make any moves at all, obviously, it's easier to make them in the environment of lower liquidity, because we had a non-event days and as NFP reports, as ECB days, as FOMC statements days, and so on. Everything can be obviously a non-event, and if that is the case, then that is the case. But if there's going to be some bigger reactions on those scheduled news, then they can be even bigger in the environment of lower liquidity. Also, note that due to dividends, which are going to be next week on German stocks on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, we could get a sudden drop in quote difference after I already made and sent and published your morning notes and charts. So that's something to watch if you're trading futures. So okay, that would be it for this bigger picture video. I gave some simple scenarios. We are watching those closes and highs and lows of Friday on DAX and on S&P. We have those scenarios, and we have again a bunch of scheduled data and scheduled earning reports on top of the occasional news bombs regarding tariffs. So that would be it for this edition of weekly bigger picture videos. And as always, I wish you a pleasant weekend and